Good evening, everybody. Good evening. Hello and welcome to this Licensing Committee, Thursday, 25th of January. Apologies, please.
Apologies from Councillor Hudson and Councillor Smale.
Thank you. Put your microphone.
Sorry, apologies from Councillor Sandu as well.
Thank you. Item 2, late items, I haven't got any. Item 3, declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest? Okay. Item 4, minutes of the meeting held on the 2nd of November 2023. Has anybody got any issues with them, or are you happy to move? Move. Thank you. So moving on to item 5, general licensing fees and charges 24/25, and that's Ange, please. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. The first report we've got this evening is in relation to the general licensing fees and charges. These are the ones that cover basically everything except for taxi licensing. Each year, as a public protection service, we review these fees and charges. What we do is make sure that any additional costs or efficiencies of providing the services are properly reflected in delivering the service. This is obviously what we are allowed to do by law. The proposed general licensing fees for 24/25 are contained in the appendices, and I hope the members have had a chance to give them some consideration. Appendix 1 sets out the proposed fees for a number of different licences, registrations and permits. All of these are administered by the licensing service. The costs are based on a cost recovery and inflationary cost increases. So basically we cannot charge more than it costs the service to provide that service to the customer. Due to efficiencies made over the past 12 months, it has been possible to keep the level of increase this year to a minimal amount. This will obviously help support small businesses at a time when it is particularly difficult for them to grow. Appendix 3 sets out the fees and charges under the Licensing Act 2003. All these fees are set by statute and we cannot amend those. The recommendations, Chair, are to approve the proposed fees and charges for 24/25 set out in the appendices 1 and 2, and to note that the statutory fees in Appendix 3 are set out in law. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any questions? Thought we were going to get away with it. Councillor Owen.
Thank you, Chair. I've only briefly looked. I noticed all the gambling, the casino ones and so on. There's no increases. I just wondered why.
Yes, there hasn't been any increases in those. We carried out a cost recovery exercise on the gambling element. The gambling element works slightly differently in the fact that although the fees are set by statute, there is a cap on each of those fees. We've reviewed our fees from top to bottom and found that with the internal savings that we've been able to make, there's been no need to increase the fees in that area.
Any further questions?
Sorry, what is the percentage of the fee increase?
It varies on different fees because once you're taking into account on costs, from the figures Finance gave me, I think we're working at around 18%. But with savings, we've been able to recoup some of that on the costings.
Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. Could I just ask if we're optimising the saving, the income that the council can make from these fees, or is it very prescriptive in terms of said it's set by law. It's a range in which legally the council can consider, or is it literally very, very prescriptive?
The Licensing Act 2003, which is the alcohol and entertainment regime, that is set by statute, and there's absolutely nothing we can do in relation to those fees. The gambling, as I say, has got a cap by statute, but we can limit our costs as to how much the service costs. In relation to the everything else, the animal fees, etc., we have to charge what the service costs to run. We can't make a profit. We have to go by service demand.
Sorry, there's no VAT that's been paid.
Sorry, say that again.
And no VAT, just to clarify that there's no VAT on these prices.
These fees are exempt from VAT? Yes. Yeah.
Okay, any further questions on item 5? So approve the recommendations. 2.1 to approve the proposed fees and charges for 24-25 set out Appendix 1 and Appendix 2, and 2.2 to note the statutory fees and charges made under Licensing Act 2003 set out at Appendix 3. Are we all happy with those two recommendations? Thank you. So we'll move on to item 6. And the final item, which is taxi licensing fees and charges for 24-25. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This report is about the set of fees that are described earlier as anything other than the ones we've dealt with in the former report. And the report provides information on the proposed licence fees and charges for driver, vehicle and operator licences and any ancillary charges relating to taxi licensing. The legislation, the Local Government Miscellaneous Provisions Act 1976, makes provision for the local authority to charge fees it considers reasonable to cover the cost of issuing and administrating licences, as well as that for vehicle inspections and general administration costs. These fees and charges are reviewed annually. The licensing functions are self-financing and again non-profit making. And so these fees must be set at a level to recover the total costs incurred in providing the service. Separate accounts must be kept for each type of licence issued. So that's for all 5 of them. So Hackney carriage drivers, Hackney carriage vehicles, private hire drivers, private hire operators and private hire vehicles. Over the past year, as in every other area of business, costs have increased exponentially, and the cost of maintaining this service has not been excluded from that. As such, there will be a slight increase to the fees this year and the proposed licence fees and charges for drivers, vehicle and operator licences. They are all set out in Appendix 1 of the report for you. Before the new fees and charges are introduced, the Council is required to publish them in a local newspaper. Any representations must be lodged 28 days from the date of publication. The Act provides that where a representation is made and not withdrawn, the Council must consider it. In the event of this occurring, any matters that may arise can be considered at the next scheduled meeting of the Licensing Committee. The recommendations, therefore, Chair, are to approve, subject to the consideration of representations, the proposed licence fees and charges for driver, vehicle, operator and other charges as set out in Appendix 1. To request the Service Director of Public Protection and Street Pride to advertise the proposed fees. To delegate to the Service Director, following consultation with the Chair, to consider any representations received within the required period and take the appropriate action if required to address those representations. And then finally, to approve the new fees and charges to become effective from the 1st of April, subject to there not being any representations received during the required period or where any such representations required to be considered by the Licensing Committee. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Other questions?
Angela, you know, you mentioned a recruitment team member. Is that an extra team member, or you already sort of this was the existing team member? So this recruitment, what this team member will be doing?
We have been lucky enough to increase the team by a team member who will be and is being trained at the moment on taxi licensing. So that person will be working solely on taxi licensing business.
Councillor Rowe? Is it Mark?
Yeah, the DBS checks seem to have gone down in price where everything else has gone up or stayed the same. So I just want to make sure that that wasn't an error, or is it just cost us reduced for doing those security checks?
You're right, Councillor, that is the only one that hasn't changed and has in fact gone down. The reason being for that is that the charge to the disclosure and barring service has reduced slightly.
Any further questions?
Thank you, Chair. I noticed some of the increases are quite considerable, like 20% really, or thereabouts, for the licences and so on. And hopefully that is justified. It does seem quite considerable when we've just spoke about the casino licences and gambling facilities, and we've not weighted them with anything extra this year. And yet we're trying to burden the taxi drivers. I just feel it might be a little unfair. And also, there is other ones that have gone down. Some of the replacement licences seem to have gone down in price as well. Thanks.
Just for clarification, some of the items that have gone down have because we've been able to source cheaper resources, which has obviously helped reduce those sundry prices. Some of the things such as the facilities we need for printing, or the availability of additional staff to facilitate that in a quicker time frame than normal. So those things put together have helped us either maintain or reduce. It does appear that some of the sundry items have gone up a little bit more, but as again, they have been done on a cost recovery, and they will be looked at again in 12 months if we can, hopefully in that time, maybe find some additional resourcing, whether that be internal or external. Then I'm hoping to see a drop in those pricings.
I think it's fair to say Angela's working on a lot of things for in order for that to happen as much as possible. It's just to remember that licensing is a non-profit, so none of this is for profit. It's literally to cover costs. I just have a question that was passed to me by Councillor Smale, who had a family emergency this evening, but I'm going to relay the question for him. He's put, I understand the problem of the administrative process of all licences and the cost associated. However, this increase, will it not drive the risk for licence holders, in particular taxi licences, to leave the local authority? increases could be forcing them to other local authorities. So have we got comparative figures of costs in other local authorities, and are we seeing a decline in taxi licences in Derby, and is this being monitored?
Thank you, Chair. If we can just say in the first instance, we have had to make some changes in the fees, but through internal savings, we've been able to keep those, hopefully, as low as possible. As we all know, everything is costing more in every area of our own lives, let alone that of small businesses with the additional costs. Looking forwards over the next 12 months, we are starting a full internal review of process, procedures and costings, including internal and external charges for taxi licensing. This will enable us to support new drivers and retain existing drivers by making the process more streamlined and investing in moving things onto digital platforms. That in itself will help minimise in-house costs. Once this work's been completed, we will then look at sharing the work we've done with the trades, which will hopefully bring back drivers to Derby and create a healthy, vibrant taxi and private hire offer. On the second part of that, I have done a comparator with some of our local councils and some of the core councils, such as the Leicesters, the Nottingham, the Wolverhampton. And our prices in relation to those are competitive. Obviously, Wolverhampton is a different scenario because their economies of scale do work totally different to local or city councils. But generally around our area, and like I say, in comparison with other core cities, we are not the most expensive. There is also the provision about numbers. We have lost numbers, yes, but from the stats that I've been receiving, so has every other council bar one on that list. So it is, it appears to be a commercially influenced drop in numbers, and if we can do something to lift the experience of of our customers, then I am hoping that that will entice, maybe that is the wrong word, but bring some new drivers back to us, and like I say, so that we can start building our trade again.
Thank you. Any more questions?
A lot of the trade does seem to be going to Wolverhampton. What is it about Wolverhampton that makes Wolverhampton so attractive to a taxi driver?
As I've said, Wolverhampton have built an economy of scale so that the more applications they are getting, the cheaper they can make their prices. That obviously is how economy works. In relation to their standards, with drivers, they do ensure that they do have a safeguarding element. A lot of their tests are done online, which is why I said I want to try and look at moving some of ours to digital formats. With the vehicles, they do have an age limit. They allow them to take their MOT at any approved station. We do things like designating the stations that our drivers can go to. So those are the sorts of things that can be looked at in a review, because they're the sorts of things that would make the process smoother and, like I say, help build up our numbers. But that is how the Wolverhampton theme works in a very brief overview.
Okay, any further questions? Okay, so we'll take the recommendations. 2.1 to approve the subject consideration of representations, the proposed licence fees for charges for driver, vehicle and operator licences and other licences for 24-25 set out as Appendix 1. Everybody happy with that one? 2.2, to request the Service Director of Public Protection and Street Pride to advertise the proposed fees and charges. 2.3, to delegate the Service Director, following consultation with the Chair, to consider any representations received within the required period and to take appropriate action if required to address such representations. Okay. 2.4, to approve the new licence fees and charges to become effective from the 1st of April 2024, subject to there not being any representations received during the required period or where any such representations have been considered. Okay, thank you. So thank you very much, everybody. That concludes this evening's meeting. Thank you.